nearby school. So it's not to say that the ministry is inflexible or it doesn't understand what the dynamics are that are playing out in relation to households, but sometimes we need to have somebody just saying, this is what the issue is, and then together we can try to find a solution to the problem. Ziggy?
Yes, thank you so much, Minister, but I'm not going to give you a break. We're going to go right into a question that relates to that one. This question states that there are some parents of new students to the classroom that are not familiar with the platforms used. So is it possible that going forward, there'll be workshops to help affiliate the parents with these teaching tools? And maybe there are and the person is not aware, but I'm going to give you the opportunity now to speak to us about what is possible and what is not.
Yeah, in the early part of COVID, like last March, we had to engage in doing a number of YouTube videos. The MRD department and the rest of our team were trying to cater to those parents, especially special needs parents who, again, were not aware of what to do. Because the truth is, we spend a lot of time sending the children to school, but not everybody's paying attention to what the children are doing. And the truth is, a lot of parents discovered how difficult it is for teachers in a classroom environment having to manage the number of children in a school day. Now, what we've tried to do is to do those videos so that parents would be able to understand better how to facilitate the children's email access to the children's email accounts, and also to be able to help them as well with basic understanding of the online environment also. I think we did some videos on online etiquette, because we had a major problem at first where the children were not appropriately dressed. I won't say they have to be in uniform, but I do feel that you want to still make sure that your children are neat and they're tidy, and that they're what we would call in Bajan terms, they're presentable in that environment. And we get it that they're not, all the environments are not the same. So we get sometimes that the cameras may not be able to be turned on. We understand that, but we do think that there's still a place for, as a parent, making sure that your child is following the classes, that the children are actually participating, just checking, even if you don't understand what is there for the homework, at least making sure that the homework is done, that something is done in the book. And if you are in doubt, basically reaching out to somebody who may be in a better position to assist the student to be able to help them. But those tools are online. You can find them on the MRD Barbados YouTube page, as well as on the Instagram page. I believe CBC should also, they're in the process of starting to run those videos again, so that parents will have the opportunity to know how to do some of these things, and certainly refreshers for the students as well, so that they can participate in the online environment.
Thank you so much, Minister. And believe it or not, a lot of these questions and to keep you on your toes this evening. An attendee is asking, is there any consideration being given to granting reputable persons or organizations to provide educational supervision for children whose parents have to work? And I think all of this ties into the framework that you were just discussing, but this one is unique, because this is...
Yeah. I would have to say that we haven't set a supervisory framework per se, and the reason we haven't been able to do it is because of the cases and because of the rate of vaccination in the country. Just in talking at the level of the subcommittee just now, we were discussing similar issues in terms of whether we could have the community centers open, as some people have suggested, and that we are keen to do it as well. We've entered into those discussions with the Ministry of Community Development. But the truth is that until we are able to see an uptake in the vaccination rate, and we're able to put all of the measures in place to make sure that the persons who are even engaging with the students are themselves vaccinated, and that we're able to see the level of community transmission coming down, it is difficult to be able to take the risk on our students in this particular environment. So it may seem as though we are being overly cautious. Well, yeah, we are being overly cautious, because this is the future of our nation. So if we are going to play Russian roulette with them, then I don't know who's going to look after us when we get old, Ziggy. So we have to put ourselves in a position where we make the environment safe, for both the students and for the teachers. But at the same time, we have to arm parents with the information that they need to keep reinforcing as well to the students what they have to do, because they have a responsibility too, making sure that the children are not running wild in communities, that they're also following the protocols. I see them every day, the masks are down on the chin, they're in their hand, or they're not there at all. And I don't think people understand that apart from all of those protocols, we also have to get the uptake amongst our preteens and our teens for vaccination as well. We are probably now at just over 6,000. Probably by today, we may be up at 7,000 students in that 12 to 17 category. We need to be closer to 21,000 in that age group if we are going to have a serious conversation about getting even that age group back into the school environment. Okay, and that really is a call to parents to take the vaccination campaign seriously, because just as we have with other vaccinations where you have to have vaccination in order to re-enter school, the truth of the matter is that this is one other layer of protection, as all other layers of protection are offered by the other vaccinations that we need in order to make sure that we can return to the school environment safely. So it's a two-way street. We want to get them to school, but the parents have to help us as well to be able to vaccinate the children and to ensure that it's as safe as possible for them to be able to return.
Thank you so much, Minister. For those of you that have been asking, the session is also being streamed live on YouTube. Once you go to YouTube and visit MRD Barbados, that's the Media Resource Department, you can access the session live on YouTube. The Zoom has been acting a bit strange. I'm seeing about 500 attendees. We know that the maximum limit for this session is much more than that. So if you or someone you know are trying to attend and having difficulty, feel free to visit YouTube, MRD Barbados, and you can log on there and track the session.
Vicky, I think Sean has a question. He has his hand raised.
Yes, seeing that. Go ahead, Sean. Thanks, Chief.
Thanks very much. This one is for Sanjay Bradshaw. If you don't reach 70% vaccination in school children and teachers, what is the next move for the government? Because I heard you talk about 70% vaccinations, but we are really far off that target right now.
Yeah, but Sean, what if we do reach it? What if we do reach it, not just 70% in our schools, but what if we reach it in relation to the entire population? Then we won't be having discussions about curfews, and we probably won't be having discussions about restrictions. So I'm not going to focus on what if we don't get it. I am more focused on us getting it. And what is it that as parents, what is it as teachers, what is it as the unions, what is it as the ministry that we got to be doing in order to ramp up the campaign to get children vaccinated and adults to be able to get back to some degree of normalcy. I think if we focus on what if we don't do it, then we're focusing on the wrong thing. I think everybody needs to ask themselves a serious question. Have you done enough to be able to make sure that you can get your children back to a level of normalcy? Have you been to the doctor and talked to the doctor about vaccinations? If you have doubts, have you expressed those doubts to somebody who may be more knowledgeable? Have you, refused to accept a lot of the fake news that is out there and try to decipher for yourself what is real and what isn't? So it's not about what if we don't get to the 70%, because like I said before, the 70% is also dependent on our level of transmission in the country. What the Ministry of Health tried to do was to pretty much at the time, and this was like 2 weeks ago, when we were nowhere near where we are now, but we were creeping in this direction, they tried to set some thresholds that we could work towards. Because if we don't set a roadmap for getting back to school, we're going to find ourselves in a position where there is the mental health issues creep in. There's nothing to look forward to. The amount of businesses that have been affected by children also not being able to be in school is ridiculous. I mean, we've got the school uniforms, retailers, we've got the vendors at the roadside who sell to the children, who also offer a level of support to them as well. There's so many different facets to being able to get back to school that are important, that the vendors have to ask themselves some questions. The persons who are part of the ancillary staff have to be asking themselves, have they done their part to help the children of this country get back into the school environment? Because it's no longer just about you. It's also about how what you do is also impacting on other people. And we've said before, if it is a case of medical reasons or religious grounds, the law is there. It's very clear. It has always been there in relation to vaccinations. Nothing has changed. And we get that there are some people who, for those two reasons, cannot take the vaccine or cannot have the children take the vaccine. We get that. And there is provision for that. But for the others, where the facts are there and you can reason yourself in relation to whether you should take it or not, then we encourage you to take the vaccine so that we can get these kids back into school. And let me just say that, there is hope on the horizon for the ones under 12, because Pfizer is in the process of being able to have the approval for the vaccine for those, I think, from 5 years old and up. So there is some hope coming that we will get to a point where it won't just be a conversation about the teens and the preteens or about thresholds. It's going to be really a question of getting the population vaccinated so that we have another layer of protection against this particular variant.
Thank you, Minister. Sean, satisfied? All right. There's a question here that I believe the Chief may be able to answer that has to do with the socialization of children outside of break time and lunchtime. Mr. Warren is asking, in the school setting, is it possible that while they break for these dedicated times, are we going to adequately allow our children to have set time outside of school where they go online and socialize with each other and talk and laugh, because they're not getting to do it physically? So is the curriculum going to adapt for those times to be included outside of lunchtime and break time?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Ziggy. That's an excellent question, Mr. Warren. We must recognize that the social element is an element that we can't ignore. But while we look at the social element, we must be very careful as well that we are cognizant of the effect that screen time has on the health of our children. So while it is a good idea for students to socialize online, I wouldn't recommend that they socialize right after school, right after having all of that screen time. If the parents want to get together and say, well, all right, let's let my son or my daughter spend about 15, 20 minutes chatting with friends, that can be done, that can be organized. But with regard to the screen time, that is my concern, having the child on the computer, looking at the computer screen, be it for social purposes, be it for educational purposes, for that long period of time. Yes, but I understand where you're going with it, and I would encourage parents, even as the children are having breaks throughout their school day, I'm going to ask parents to encourage, and grandparents and uncles and aunties to encourage the children to get up from in front of the screen and stretch and do a couple exercises. Maybe if they want to go and read a book, they can read a book, but that screen time, having that screen time for that length of time, for a long period of time, can have negative effects on the eye health of our children.
All right, thank you, Chief. And a ticklish question that's here. I have a lot of these, Minister, and I'm sure you're gonna you can address this one because I've seen this a lot. This question has to do with mandatory vaccination for teachers and for students. Persons are wondering if at any given time the vaccination is going to become mandatory.
Well, I think, Ziggy, I spent four sessions across the country talking about the whole issue of mandatory vaccinations, the government's position, and also hearing from people about their concerns and anxieties regarding vaccinations. And we have made it abundantly clear that we have no intention of making it mandatory. I think what we have instead tried to do is to provide people with as much information as possible about vaccinations, give the history of vaccinations in our country, letting people know that it is because of our high level of vaccination of children in particular. All of us got the jab. We either got the jab or we got the sugar under our tongue when we were at primary school. And, we're still here. And, we have to remind people that while something is new, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad for you. And we have all had to walk that road where we've had to trust the doctors and the medical persons in the medical profession. But I think the risk of something going wrong is far less than getting this right. And we hear cases and everything, any kind of medication, there's always something, there's always some side effect. It doesn't affect everybody the same way. But the truth is the stories of persons who have benefited from the vaccines are far greater than those who may have had any complication. So no, we are not intending to do a mandatory vaccination. We certainly never, that was never part of the discourse. It was put on the table, I believe at one point by the private sector, because they have a right as well to be able to protect their businesses. But from our position as government, we've said, arm the people with information, arm our parents with information, and also allow people to make the choices in the best interest of themselves and the children. What we have said, however, because the law does allow for it, because it's standard, and I think the Ministry of Health and Wellness will be doing it shortly, is providing the amendment to the regulations to be able to ensure that the COVID-19 vaccine, as well as I think HPV and some of the others that were not necessarily on the list of mandatory vaccination to be able to go back into school, that those are actually provided for. So in other words, in order to get back into school, you would have to have the vaccination. If you can't have the vaccination, it would have to be on medical grounds, or it would have to obviously be on religious grounds. But this is no different from entering nursery school or entering primary school or even university. I have traveled, for instance, to enter another country, and I went to Peru a couple of years ago. I had to get a vaccine for yellow fever. This is not unusual. And regrettably, a lot of people have gone into a panic mode over this whole question of vaccinations. And perhaps, that is where the alarm is coming. But we've not, I think Barbadians are intelligent enough to be able to decipher the truth from what is false as well. So I hope that they will continue to decipher and make the decisions in the best judgment of their children as well.
All right, thank you so much for that comprehensive answer, Minister. The position of the government clearly remains the same. The information be put out there for us to, like I can say in Bajan, let us eat up the information and make productive and informed decisions. Yes, Nicole?
I just want to segue to Dr. Danny for a moment, because as a teacher, some other questions have been coming, and even from my neighbors, they wanted to know, since there's education reform that is now taking place and the children are online, having learning, what modifications are being made to the curriculum, because some are concerned that they're only half day, they're only some days and so on. So how is the curriculum going to be covered, or how is it going to be presented to ensure that the children get what they need in the online environment?
Well, thank you, Nicole, for that question. And I understand the concern of the parents. Obviously, the online modality is one that, as I said, it is strange to both our children and our teachers. So one of the first things that we have to do is make sure that our teachers are proficient in the delivery of online instruction. I have had discussions with many teachers who were concerned that because they were required to teach every day, they did not get the opportunity to get the practice that they needed. And I had to make the point that in teaching every day, you are actually getting the practice. And before long, because you are getting the practice, you will become proficient. But one of the things that we have to do is, where we find that there are teachers who are very competent in their delivery, we must record the lessons that those teachers do. And we must make those lessons available to all of our children across the system. So one of the things we are talking about right now is doing videos that can be utilized by those people who are not as competent as others. So instead of some children getting apples and other children getting oranges, all of our children will be able to benefit from apples because these videos can be made available across the system. We have also been talking about situations where there are some teachers who are exceedingly competent at what they're doing, and in the monitoring exercise that we conducted the last time our children were in the online modality before this term, we saw a lot of cases where there were teachers who were exceedingly competent. And we believe that we can do what we call letting them operate in a single virtual space where one teacher who is really good at teaching a particular concept can deliver that concept to a number of classes in a number of schools across the country. And then the actual teacher on the spot can behave in the same way that a tutorial leader in the university would, and take his or her class and do the close work that is required after the broad introduction to the lesson with the children. So we are looking at various ways of preparing the instruction and presenting it to the children so that the children will get a good quality of instruction across the board, and not just because they have a teacher who is more competent than other teachers. In addition, we recognize that our training programs must now focus on making the teachers competent to deliver in the technological modality. And therefore, we are planning significant ongoing teacher training to make sure that the teachers can develop the competence.
And I would also like to say here, to supplement what Dr. Denny said, with regard to the content, Nicole, in the area of social studies, science, mathematics, and English, the curriculum department at the ministry identified certain topics and concepts that are germane to the students' development in those areas. And we now have a syllabus for the term that is somewhat shorter than what they had before. We've identified those concepts that are critical, those concepts that the students need to learn and to understand to move on to the next level. And those are encapsulated in the syllabus for term 1, 2021, 2022. Okay.
All right. Thanks for that support, Dr. Bradshaw. I want to tackle both you and Dr. Denny with two questions here. I'm going to compile them together so you get the idea. The questions relate to no child being left behind. However, we are aware that some children are having challenges with the online platform. Now, their parents who are saying they are willing to do their 2 cents worth. I am willing to help my child, but where are the resources? How can I easily access the resources? Do they exist? And if they don't exist, as I heard Dr. Denny made reference to, if they're being compiled, when will we have access to them? Worksheets, videos, something that when I'm finished working at 4:30 and I decide I'm going to dedicate an hour and a half to my son or daughter, where do I have the resources that I can then try to teach my child, or at least guide them through the topics and different things that they need to know to ensure that they are not left behind because they're struggling with this online environment?
Okay, well, I'll start. Many of our teachers use the Google Suite platform. And on that platform, there's the facility for teachers to store information, store worksheets, they can store tests, quizzes online. So parents can always go into the child's classroom to see what was done during the day, to see the worksheets. And of course, they can use that to assist their children. What I want to say as well is that on the MRD website, you can find some sample lessons. So you can do a search, you can look through to see if there are any lessons there that can assist you in assisting your child with his or her homework. Yes, but moving forward, of course, we want to provide more videos for our parents, because we recognize that not everyone is proficient in each area, and we want to provide the support for them so that they can adequately assist their children or their wards. Dr. Denny?
Yes, and I will simply add that we are also looking at acquiring other tools to provide the children with, that their parents can help them with, where they can do exercises and they can get feedback immediately on how they've done the exercises. Their parents can help them. And this also helps the teachers, because when the children have completed those activities, the teacher is aware that he or she can move on, because the children understand and they have already got the feedback. And this frees the teacher up to give more support to the children who need more individualized time from the teacher. So therefore, we are looking at acquiring a number of those tools that the parents can have access to in order to assist their children as well.
Okay, thanks so much, Dr. Denny, but you're not off the hook just yet. I have a question here from an adult who is dyslexic and has found that the online environment is problematic for persons who suffer with learning difficulties and learning disabilities. So they're asking you, has there been any consideration for children with disabilities? Because before the pandemic, they're saying that they were already suffering. So this has now accelerated what has been a bad situation. What are the plans put in place to ensure that these children are not left behind?
Well, I'll tell you that children with special educational needs have a significant place in the reform agenda. We recognize that these children are going to need specific tools and resources in order to help them, and therefore that is part of the reform agenda. I am a little surprised that a child who is dyslexic would be having extreme difficulties in the online modality, because sometimes the way that the information is provided in the online modality is helpful to a child with dyslexia. But again, this goes to the fact that teachers are not aware of how to deal with specific children, and part and parcel of what the Ministry of Education will be doing, the Student Services section in the ministry to be exact, they will be putting on specific activities to assist these children. They have already begun the development of their programming. They have presented it to the officers in the ministry, and a lot of what they have planned has been approved, and I believe it is being rolled out this term as they try to put things in place to specifically help children with special educational needs. And this is children who are not only dyslexic, but autistic, and who have other disabilities as well. So they have not been left out.
Yes, Dr. Denny, you're absolutely correct. They have a community of practice where they share resources, they share ideas, and they have strategies for addressing the deficiencies that students with disabilities have. So far, so good.
Ziggy, I just want to add here, there was a very hodgepodge approach to children with special needs before. It's a work in progress. I can tell you it's perfect, but I'm telling you that we've come a long way since certainly I became the minister, and I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but I'm telling you for a fact that we've made a lot of strides in this area. And one of the things that we started to look at was, instead of having some teachers trained in special needs, where this became almost the exception. So only a few would get, a batch of teachers would be trained and a few would be sent overseas. The view now is that we have to have all of them trained in the special needs and how to deliver special needs education. So we've tried to ramp up They focus on teachers being able to identify children who need support, being able to know what to do in terms of the intervention, because the truth is the parents may pick up that the children have some challenge. I mean, and parents have a way of expressing it differently when they realize that the children may not be as academic as they should be. And so they'll say the children are slow, which obviously we know is not the correct terminology to use. But the truth of the matter is that we have to make sure that the place where children spend the most time, that the persons who are delivering instruction are able to understand the challenges that children have and to be able to put in place the individual education plans to help them to cope. Because there's nothing worse than a child leaving school feeling as though, you know, there is no purpose for them, that they have no place in the world. Because they didn't understand half of what was being taught while they were in school. And we all know that many of the successful people across the world are persons who have suffered with dyslexia. They are persons who have suffered with Asperger's. Most of the most brilliant minds in the world have been people who were different or challenged in some way. And so our focus now is not just to single out children who are different, but to teach tolerance as well, because there's no point having children who are different and other children who are also different don't understand the differences. So we have to start to teach from the level of our adults, but also at the level of our children, to be tolerant of other children so that we can have a more inclusive school system, that children who have disabilities can be integrated into the classroom and not treated as though they must be placed in a remedial class and they're not good enough to be able to work on the same level with other classes. So this requires a mental shift, a change of thought in the way how we approach education, how we approach pedagogy, how we approach the teaching of education, but also it is going to require a consistent dialogue with the country about changing our own behaviors, our own prejudices towards children who do not appear as though they have the same abilities as another child. And I think it really starts there. And once it starts there and with the teachers, I think that we have a good chance of being able to teach our kids coming up about being tolerant of other people. So I just wanted to add that as well.
Yep. Thanks so much,
and
Minister.
Ziggy, if I could just add one more thing there. One of the things that we are doing as part of the reform agenda is that we are developing a linked profiling system that includes all of the pertinent information that is needed to send forward on children, so that as they move through the system, teachers get this information and can identify what the issues are with the children. So whereas at one time, a child would go into a class and the teacher would not be aware that this child is dyslexic, the profile now has that information in it, and it speaks to the things that are necessary for properly engaging that student, and the teacher can now operate in such a way to address the specific needs of that child.
Yeah, I just want to come back in again, Ziggy, before, because I think this is a very important issue, and for me it is very near and dear to my heart as well. But I think the other thing that we've been doing is trying to look at auditing our teachers, looking at what sets our teachers have, because we have a lot of imbalance in the system. We have some schools where we have a lot of good teachers who can do the special needs education, and then in others we have some who are not as equally qualified. So that's why I'm saying that we have to get to a point where we may have to move around a few people to be able to get the balance that is needed, so that almost every school is able to offer that additional support that our children need. And that obviously is a work in progress, but we started the process of looking at schools, especially, coming out of common entrance, looking at schools that have been underperforming, because in many cases, it's been the same schools, whether at the primary level or at the secondary level. And when you check the statistics, you are seeing that the children have obviously fallen through the cracks because they may have had some of these challenges that were not addressed. So it doesn't make sense having one school with all support possible, and then another school not having the same level of support. And so that type of call to teachers is what we've been trying to do over the course of the last few years, trying to figure out where those teachers are, letting them come forward and indicate what skill sets they have, trying to put those courses on so that they can improve their ability to be able to teach and to deliver instruction in the classroom. And so to answer your question, so essentially no child is either feeling like are left behind, or that we leave them behind as well.
All right. Sean, I'm seeing your hand, but I am gonna drag both the chief, the minister, and Dr. Denny now. We're changing the narrative a bit on this particular question that has come up while you were on that topic. And the question asks about the common entrance exam and the removal of the common entrance exam. The person is really stating that they don't believe that the common entrance exam should be removed until all schools have the same facilities. And they gave an example. The older secondary schools should be able to provide the vocational curriculum as well as the newer secondary schools, and conversely, the newer secondary schools should be able to provide the same curriculum academically as the older secondary schools. So this person is stating that until we have that balance, common entrance should remain and should not be something that's on the cards for removal.
Well, first of all, you know, we could set that target of all schools being equal, and we would probably be 20 years down the line and we'll still be having this conversation. What we've chosen instead to do is to start the improvements of the schools, start the improvement in terms of the reforms that are necessary to make that transition. Obviously, the pandemic has kind of slowed things down a bit because we're not able to engage in the way that we would have wanted to across the country on the full reforms. But the truth of the matter is that we've been spending significant sums of money improving school plans. And when I say school plan, I mean school plan infrastructure, to make sure that the type of infrastructure that students are going to across the board is a level playing field. Because certainly the last few years, we did not have a level playing field in terms of resources that were going to certain secondary schools. And as a result, we saw the deficiencies in not only in frustration from our teachers, but also from our students who did not even want to go to school because the conditions at school were no better in some cases than where they were coming from in their own house schools. So a lot of resources have had to be spent in improving the conditions of the plant to make sure that the quality of the environment is such that a child wants to get up in the morning and go. We've also had to spend some resources in terms of changing the curriculum. We've not had curriculum reform, as Dr. Denny alluded to, since 2000 in any major way. There's no document to say this is the level of curriculum reform. We've made changes here and there. But what we have done in the last few years is to start to introduce things like coding and robotics. We've been training teachers. Again, we've got another shipment coming in of the robotics kits, because when we realize that, you know, this, where the world is going, we don't want to leave children behind. We want that every special needs school, every primary school, every nursery school, every secondary school has the opportunity for a child that wants to be able to explore the world of coding and robotics, and to think of themselves not as just consumers, but as creators, as innovators, that they have that opportunity now to be able to do that. We've also talked about specialist institutions, where we've challenged the principals as well to look within themselves, look at the types of subjects that the students are excelling at in their institutions, and to let us look at how we can identify specialist areas so that every school also becomes known for having a specialty area, as opposed to the top schools and the bottom schools or the middle schools. You have schools where a child now can say, I want to go to X school because they are offering a strong program in a particular area. A parent makes a decision not on, oh, I went to school there, so I want my child to go there alone, but they make decisions based on knowing their child, understanding what the strengths and the weaknesses are of their child, and being able to say, I want to find the best school that fits the personality, that fits the goals and the objectives of the child that I have brought into this world. And therefore, let me look and make a decision, not based on, you know, society's views of the institution or something I saw on social media, but rather let's look and see what are the programs that are being offered by the institutions. And lastly, Ziggy, I mean, we did a number of videos for each of the schools this year, and we did them because we wanted to give the leaders of the institutions that opportunity to boast about what they do, because too often we are consumed by the negative images and portrayals of our schools because of an incident with fighting or something happening at the institution. But very often we don't talk about the good things that are happening at the institutions. And I believe that that time has now come where, as part of the reform process, we start to talk about the good. We start to talk about the technical and vocational training that is happening in the schools. We talk about the levels of certification that our young people are getting. They may not be academic in some cases, but here's an opportunity for them to use their hands. They may be interested in robotics and coding. We give them that opportunity. It is, and I maintain this, the school does not make you. What we have a responsibility to do from the Ministry of Education is to put the right resources into the schools. And if we have to change and modify the curriculum so that a child who is technical still has an understanding about basic business and has a basic literacy and numeracy understanding, then that's what we have to do. But we can't have a one-size-fits-all solution to education either. And we have to get our students seeing themselves as entrepreneurs. We got to have them seeing themselves as consumers. We have to let them see themselves as creators of things, as opposed to just sitting down and waiting for a job when they leave school from somebody as well. So we have to prepare them. And if we do nothing else, that is really what we've been doing within the last few years. So 11 plus is only is a small part of the discussion of what really has to be part of the wider conversation about the reforms in education. We are on record. We've said as a government how we feel about the 11 plus, but we're not stopping the train. We are moving. You've seen me open the Parkinson facility that is going to come on stream for the students who are creative. We've got plans for a school that is going to be focused and specialized in agriculture. We've got a school of technology that we're working on a project with the ADB, and the list goes on. Tourism, we've got areas where we are going to be able to let children and parents select based on the interests and be able to chart a career path that is of interest to them from a very early age as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Minister. That is something that I personally will welcome, where we go the route of allowing a child to know, it's not only about going to Harrison College or Queen's College or wherever anymore. It's about going where I'm going to develop best, because this school has the reputation for promoting and allowing me to own what I want to do. All right, Sean, go ahead.
Yes, this one is for the minister. I just got this on my telephone. Parents want to know, when will school be reopened? Simple.
Yeah, before you go, Minister, I was coming to that as well. So let me couple up some of the ones we have here. They definitely want to hear your answers surrounding 3 to 5 age group, because they said parents are very concerned that age group requires a lot of face-to-face attention, but they want to know what is required of them and where we need to go in order to be back in that classroom in January latest.
It sounds to me like you are trying to set targets for us.
No, I asking the questions. I'm seeing the questions and I'm asking them because persons want to know what needs to be done.
Right, and they're fair. Let me just say that none of the decisions that we take are made in a vacuum. So we want your children back in school as much as all of you do. And that goes without saying. But I will continue to maintain that we have to do so in a safer manner as we possibly can. I said at the outset, so for those who didn't hear, we had met a few weeks ago and we with the Ministry of Health and Wellness, and they gave us, in a sense, a green light. This was before cases were at 100 in the 160s, of course, and our rate of transmission was as high as it is in the society. And the number of young people who were getting sick was obviously considerably less. So there were a number of factors that led to the consideration of what we could do in terms of a phased reopening or a blended approach to some of our schools. We looked at the 3 to 5 year olds at the time because we were looking at the daycare facilities, which obviously are open. But as I said before, we're getting some issues there, even with them being open. And I know Mr. Chapman from the COVID monitoring unit is intending to meet with the childcare board on Monday because of those concerns. We had to shut down a school, a daycare today as well. And so there are some concerns in relation to still that 3 to 5 year old age group, or the age group that is in daycare. We took a decision that we would need to have the 6 foot distancing, perhaps within the schools instead of 3 feet because of Delta. We also said at the time that we would look at increasing the vaccination rate, certainly of our teachers and our ancillary staff, at least to about 70%, to make sure that at least we offered a layer of protection. Because in this exercise, it really is about offering levels of protection and comfort to our parents as well. We know we will not get 100% vaccination rate across schools, but we do know that there is that effort out there to be vaccinated. And so the Ministry of Health indicated to us that at that time, we could look at a target of about 70% in order to be able to have the staff vaccinated. We also looked at, maintaining the other protocols as well. But when we met with the unions from the public school end were very concerned about the return to school at the public school level. They were concerned because they asked about, for instance, sanitizing stations in the classroom. They asked us about the whole issue of testing, whether we would be testing the students across all levels if they were to return. Would there be regular testing? Would there be random testing? And so we had to come away from that meeting, as we always do, listening to our stakeholders and start to ask them more questions of health as to what are these additional requirements that may be put on the table that we may need to consider. And so I know that the Ministry of Health and Wellness has been meeting with the Pan American Health Organization to look at our options on the whole issue of testing. Because again, parents may feel more comfortable if they know that there's a saliva test, for instance, or if there's a swab that's a little smaller than the one that is used for adults that can be used on their children. Some parents may not have an issue at all and may opt not to have the children tested. But I think we have a responsibility as a government as well to make sure that with the rising cases in children, that we also explore the other options that may be available to offer that level of additional protection and comfort to parents and to teachers and to the other stakeholders. So we are in the process of looking at the procurement of the sanitizing stations. We're also looking at the issue of testing. Again, that is a discussion that we want to have with obviously parents, but also certainly at the level of teachers as well. But that was one of the requirements that the Ministry of Health had put on the table that we obviously have to drill down to. So in terms of a start date, which is where you started with Ziggy, once we are able to see the level of transmission coming down and certainly able to see the level of vaccination going up, I think we will be in a better position to be able to say we can go back in the 1st of November, or we can go back. We call this term, a scrap term, but we start next term in January. What we need is for the students to get vaccinated. What we need is for more adults to be vaccinated. And that in itself will help us to formulate a plan in terms of our numbers and where we are to be able to get both students and teachers back into the classroom. So it's more of a case of you help me, I can help you. That's right, essentially what comes down.
So essentially then, if I want to be devil's advocate, I should say once the population behaves right and things go right, by Christmas, we should get a Christmas gift. We should be hearing something from the ministry on how far we are with regards to getting back into the classroom based on the data.
Because when we did meet with health and we had our initial discussions with the private schools, we were looking at like an early November date. But as I said, when the unions entered the conversation, there were concerns regarding whether it was safe, whether the numbers were too high in children, whether teachers at the public schools would be comfortable. No, in fairness, the private schools are ready and raring to go. And I don't want to create two Barbadoses. I've been very straight. I want that children are able to get back into the classroom as quickly as possible. But I also live in a Barbados where I feel very strongly that we got to do this thing together. So the private schools may be able to have a quick increase of all of the things that are necessary to open, but our public schools, we may have some resistance unless there is a thrust by teachers and students and also parents to say, this is what we want to do. And I think in our thrusting to map out what we want to do, it's important that we engage. It's important that the public understands that we are not just sitting down and waiting to see numbers changing, but we're trying to make sure that the schools are as safe as they possibly can be to be able to allow children back into school. Because God forbid, Ziggy, something happens to any of these children, you know, all the pressure is on, we want the schools to open. Anything happen to these children, the conversation is going to shift completely. So I would rather err on the side of caution and explore what has been put on the table, whether in this discussion or any of the discussions, so that we can say, we've looked at swabs, they're probably not the best option at this point in time. We've looked at the saliva test, this is not the best option, or it is. And what is the cost? Let us procure them, let us get them in, and we've looked at training persons to be able to go into the schools to do these types of things as well. So it's not to say that we are sitting doing nothing, but we have to make sure that we're able to open our doors so that all children can get the best out of education. And like you said before, that no child is left behind.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Minister. All right. So we've heard from the Minister on the strategy to get our kids back into the classroom, get your kids back into the classroom, because I don't have any as yet. But the question still remains on statistics, Minister. Or do you have statistics to hand which tells you how many of our eligible children for vaccination have done so and who have not? Are we trending in the right direction?
Yes, Ziggy. As of yesterday, we had 7,079 students in the 12 to 18 category. In the 12 to 14, we had 2,691. In the 15 to 18, we're at 4,388. Like I said before, we have just over 21,000 students across public and private schools that we need to get vaccinated. We accept that everybody will not get vaccinated for different reasons, because that's always been the case. Those reasons are very specific, but we are hopeful that we can get these numbers up higher, so that we can at least start to even have the conversation on our secondary school students as well. And let me just say that my other concern is our first form students, because many of the first form students haven't had the opportunity to even get to know their teacher or make friends. I mean, can you imagine what they are going through in an online environment? And, you know, I ask myself sometimes if people have a heart, because if we are to get them where we need to, there are some things as adults that we're going to have to do, and some sacrifices that we're going to have to make. I spoke to a gentleman the other night who was, you know, telling me how hard it was because he had a child who has special needs, and, you know, he's home trying to help him with the computer, trying to get him online, and it's difficult. I could see the stress on this gentleman's face. So I said to him, "Are you vaccinated?" He said, "No, he's not vaccinated." I said, "But you got to help me to help you, because I can ease the pressure if we can encourage people to get the vaccines." And for a minute, he paused, and I think he realized that he wasn't doing his part to make sure that his son was safe and that he gave his son an opportunity to get back into the classroom. I think we need to have these very real conversations about the impact that our own decisions are having on the wider population, and certainly in particular for this discussion on our children. And while we might have, and I know that in households we have smaller kids, we have the older children, and we have a layer of protection for the older children through the vaccination. Well, if you have children that are under 12, at least vaccinate yourself, at least vaccinate the older child, at least give that layer of protection in the home, which means that when you go to school and the children are also vaccinated at 70% and the teachers are vaccinated, you have another layer of protection as well. It's not a perfect scenario, but it's at least a start to be able to get us to some level of normalcy. And like you said, Ziggy, I would love to get a Christmas party going again in my constituency. I can't do it. This is 2 years now. I can't do it for the kids that look forward to these things, because we cannot do those types of outdoor events in a way that is meaningful anymore for our children. And I really would like to urge parents, and certainly those who are listening, you know, let us see if we can overcome this and at least make the effort to help us to be able to help the children get back to school.
All right, thanks so much, Minister. On that note of helping though, I had a question here from some parents regarding the cost of equipment to facilitate online school, because apparently some students are still having difficulties. Is the government in any way be looking to to create incentives where parents can purchase, let's say, a laptop for less than what it costs now at this point in time?
We don't have a program for you to purchase directly from us, but through the student revolving, both teachers and parents can enter into loan arrangements for devices. That was something we implemented since last year. So if parents want to get more information on that, they can certainly contact the student revolving loan scheme. And we did that because we recognize that in this environment, some people may not want the device from the ministry, but they may want to take out a small loan and be able to pay it back on easier terms to be able to acquire the device of their own choice. So that facility is indeed available. The other thing is that when we provided over 17,000 devices across the school system, from nursery to secondary. And this is both private sector donations and government-owned resources as well. We want to be able to provide all devices to all children, but there are some financial constraints. And let me just deal with that first of all. We've been pumping significant sums into healthcare, and rightfully so, because we're trying to keep the nation afloat. But at the same time, it means that it is taking away resources that we would often put towards education as well. And it's not to say that education is suffering, but the truth of the matter is we've had to divert those resources into the healthcare system at this point in time. We have purchased devices, but we've given those devices under loan for contracts to our parents to be responsible for the devices that are given to the students. But there's a responsibility that parents also have to make sure that those devices are returned if the children are leaving school, one, that they're also returned if the devices are broken, if they're damaged, if they're for any reason faulty, so that those children can get a new device or some arrangement can be made to pay for a broken device or a faulty device if the fault is of the making of the child or of the parent. Okay, so those provisions are in place. I know that some parents don't like to bring back the devices because they may not have the money to be able to pay whatever the fee is. But I'm begging you, cooperate with us so that we can make a decision as to whether it is a genuine case that the child mashed up the device or somebody else mashed up the device deliberately, or whether it is that we can actually facilitate the return of another device to the children. The Ministry of Education ain't heartless. I get it. I know that there are genuine instances where accidents happen. We're dealing with children. But what we cannot do is play the avoidance game of not telling the teacher, telling the ministry, telling the principals that the children don't have the devices. And then the children go without the devices, and then you hear the ministry and provide the devices. So that's the second thing. The third thing is that we have had, I think by the end of today, we may have a better understanding as to how many children, did not have devices coming into school or where those devices were broken. Because despite us saying weeks ago, let the schools know that, reach out through the ministry's website and indicate whether the child had electricity, Wi-Fi, what was the problem in terms of devices. So we had a better understanding of how many devices additional might actually be required. Many parents did not cooperate. And so that information in many cases was either late in coming or it never came at all. I am therefore urging parents to cooperate with us because I don't want that children are 3, 4, 5 weeks into the term and they don't have a device. If we have to buy it, we've made the commitment that we're going to help to facilitate that. If we have relied on the private sector and they have come forward. So it's not to say that we're in this cruel world that nobody wants to help children who are in dire straits and need to get access to connectivity in one way or the other. But we can only do this if everybody plays their part. If the phone is picked up at the ministry and the calls are answered, we can respond. If it is brought to the attention of the guidance counselor or the social workers in the schools, we can respond. If the teachers inform us or the principals inform us, we can respond. And if there are deficiencies and we haven't responded, let me apologize, no. But the truth is, more often than not, we have been able to respond where the information has been provided. And we know for sure that these are genuine cases. After we have investigated, we try to provide the devices for those families. We also have, Ziggy, persons who, because of pride, don't like to come forward and say that
that's right.
Assistance, and we get that. But there are also those who will take from the ministry and take from 10 other sources as well. And I want to address that because in this environment, there's not a lot to go around. And I think we have to, again, not just be our brother's keeper, but we also have to make sure that we are, encourageous, as Bajans would say. We got to make sure that we are also looking out for each other. So if it is that children that don't have the devices, or 1 or 2 children in a household don't have, let us know, let the channels work so that we're in a position to be able to rectify it. But as of the end of this week, I believe we will be able to compile all the data and hopefully within the course of next week, be able to start the further distribution of devices to students who may not now have, as well as the issues with electricity as well, because we're addressing those issues as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Minister. I see your hand, Nicole. I'm going to come to you shortly. Dr. Arch, I have 2 questions here that I'm going to channel in your direction with regards to the psychosocial stability of students and allowing guidance counselors and psychologists to interact with both students and parents, because this is a really stressful environment. So what has been done, has the curriculum been adjusted to ensure that this facet is addressed?
Thank you for that question, Ziggy. But before I answer that question, I just want to piggyback on something that the minister said, re the devices. And at the ministry, on our website, we have an e-learning survey form. So if you don't have a device, if you don't have Wi-Fi, if you don't have electricity, go on the ministry's website and complete that form, because we need to be able to know so that we can meet the children's needs. We can't help if we don't know. So I encourage you to go on our website and look for the e-learning survey 2021. If you go on what's next, you can just scroll down, and at the bottom, you can indicate on that form what the difficulty is, and we will be sure to help you. All right, with regard to the psychosocial aspects, that is something that the ministry has considered quite deeply. We have a mental health and wellness committee set up. It comprises officers from the Ministry of Education and other experts in the field of psychosocial wellness and mental wellness. And that committee has organized a number of initiatives to help our children through this pandemic. We know that the online environment is not an easy environment. Our students are accustomed to going out there and interacting with one another. They go to school between 9 and 3, and then they come home and they get a chance to relax. But the way it is right now, they're learning at home between 9 and 2, some of them still between 9 and 3, depending on the level. And then they have to come away and do homework online again, to wake up the next day to do the same thing again. So we understand this, and the pressure is real. Children miss their normal. We understand that. So the Ministry of Health and Wellness, the Mental Health Committee, they are working together to come up with these initiatives. They have a number of initiatives planned. They have a student hotline, and these are about to be rolled out. Student hotline. They want to go in and talk with the students at some point in time. They want to go in and talk with the teachers. They want to go in and talk with the principals. And of course, if the parents want a session with the students too, that can be organized. If that is the need, we will try to meet that need. The thing is, if you want what you want, you let us know. And now we know that is what they want, Ziggy. They want the parents to have a session. I can put that to the committee, and we can organize that for them as well.
Yep, that would be appreciated. The burden is being borne across the board, both parents and students. Yeah, and neighbors like me and uncles and brothers. I know a lot of people are feeling the stress, because where you can, you've been rotating supervision to ensure that what the teachers are delivering, the children are definitely assimilating. All right, Nico, you can go ahead.
Ziggy, before you go on, I think that there must be a recognition that the teachers are experiencing some of these mental health issues as well. And therefore, the committee is also providing for teachers to address the issues that they're having. Imagine that you as a teacher, You have to deliver your classes online, but you have your 3 children there, and they have to be supervised in their online classes as well. So it is a very stressful situation for some teachers as well. And the mental health committee is looking after programs that will address the mental health issues of teachers as well.
Thanks for that, Dr. Denny. Dr. Bradshaw, I haven't forgotten you, Nicole. In the event that I can't fill that form online though, what are my alternatives of filling that form if I need to get assistance? Because if I don't have any lecturers, they definitely can't fill it online.
Yes, you can call the Ministry of Education. You can call us at 535-0600, and you can tell the person what the issue is, and that can be, it will be recorded. So you have the online platform, and you can also call the Ministry of Education so that we can take a record.
All right, and you said that number is 535-0600?
That is correct.
Yeah, just making sure that we get that correctly.
Or as they do, Ziggy, they call the minister, or they send the minister. So they
you can find, you know you're accessible, minister.
I said it to chief. So I just need to know. I can't do what I don't know.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Yep, so you see that, you can call 535-0600, or you have access to the minister. Up to today, saw replying to some Instagram post, so you know, yeah, she doesn't miss a beat. Go ahead, Nicole.
Okay, I just want to say a few things here, because what you just spoke, Ziggy, is the reality of some parents, the rotation of supervision. Just yesterday, one parent was saying to me, you know, based on how she works and so on, the shuffling and the arranging of work schedules of different persons to have the child accommodated and so on is very, very stressful even for her. And I know that many other parents are also sharing that concern. And what was also spoken about, where teachers are parents too. And I speak that from firsthand knowledge. You know, you have to also be there to help supervise your children and so on. So we feel that stress and that burden as well. Sometimes you may have to nip away, send an activity, and you know, today I had to do a scavenger hunt for my children, and then do a scavenger hunt myself so I can give some technical assistance to my daughter. So I know it is a lived reality, and it's something that we have to work through. But I have 2 solutions that are suggestions that I want to put forward and that might help when we start looking at going back out. One that was in mind was perhaps the student nurses at BCC could be used as persons stationed at the schools to help with the testing and so on, or to at least each school can have like a resident student nurse, right? And then secondly, perhaps the social work students at UE for their practical portion of their courses as well, you know, and they could also be sent to help give some, you know, guidance and direction in the schools and so on. So those are 2 solutions I'd like to put on the table. And I would like to say to PTAs, back to the devices, we need the PTAs to also take on that initiative. The ministry can't do it all. You can't look to the government to do it all. Corporate Barbados will not do it all, because they too are stretched with what they have to put out to keep afloat. And wherever we can, do what we can. So I'm going to put it out there to the PTAs as well. And if you don't have a PTA, get some people together that are at the same school and start one. Tell the principal you're willing to you know, be a part of a PTA and you want to get started, and send us an email at bncptainc@gmail.com, bncptainc@gmail.com. Let us know that you need some help in getting started, and we will assist. Okay? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I want to come in there, Ziggy. I want to say thank you, Paul. The suggestions are welcome. Just want to tell you that we're one step ahead of you, because that has already been put on the table at the level of the Ministry of Health and Wellness and Ministry of Education. And we're using all the resources that are available to us. So we were able to you know, dig in the bag and pull out the BCC nurses that were doing the nursing program, and be able to look at them working with us to be able to go into the schools as well. So that training is going to happen at some point once the green light is given from health. just to say that they're also part of some other programs as well that are being done through the Ministry of Health and Wellness. So we are using what we have available to us, because we can't rely only on the public health officers who are already overwhelmed. So we've had to look at the persons within our nursing program. I've also reached out to the social workers as well, their association, and they're to come back to me to indicate how many of them have the qualifications that might be able to also do the testing. So we have a bit of ammunition available to us if we have to ramp up and to do that. But it starts with us having these discussions as to what is the comfort level of parents. If that is something that parents are comfortable with, then again, we are prepared to explore. If that is what is being asked of by our teachers, then that is what we're going to explore, because our mission is simply to get these kids back into school. We already have the layer of protection, which was the safety monitors, which I think I can reiterate here, that Barbados was head and shoulders above every other Caribbean territory because it was able to place these school monitors in school, not just to do the sanitizing and the social distancing, but many of them also provided an additional resource and support to teaching staff, and for many of your children as well. And so I think that is to be encouraged, but it also means that we may need some additional support within the schools, even if it is just to identify children who may have symptoms, and to just do some kind of random assessment of students. I think that is the direction that PAHO is also advising us that we can look at as well within the school system. So thank you for those ideas as well.
Thanks, Minister. All right, I'm going through the questions, so bear with me. There are a lot. I'm trying to scan them as fast as possible, mindful of the time. I know we had allocated a certain amount of time, but the minister has been entertaining. So with your permission, Minister, yeah, we can continue. One of the questions here for the PTA, what are the plans for the PTA Association to get PTAs more engaged? How do you plan to engage more parents in the PTA movement? Who's going to take that, Sean or Nicole?
Mr. Gibbs, you want me to take that one? Because we were discussing it a little earlier.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. We have been looking at having some online training webinars for persons who are still up and running with their PTAs, and for those who need to reactivate or who need to activate from scratch. We are looking soon to get some Zoom meetings in place where we can do some training for persons so that they will know what their PTA is to be about, how they can function now in this new environment, how they can look at their different officers and how they will function. So we would have a set of online workshops coming up soon where we will be looking at helping PTAs, gauge where they're at, what their needs are, and how we can help them to go ahead and get functioning. We also are going to be looking very much as PTAs need to function. We want to have some more forums like this where parents can, talk to us on a regular basis. So very soon you might be seeing messages come out one form or another. There's soon to be Dr. Archer, the School Alert app might soon be in full function. So you might be getting the School Alert app with a notice from BNC PTA saying, join us for a meeting where we can talk to you about some things that are upcoming and so on. So we just want you to be patient with it. We are in the process of gathering the resources and the resource persons that we need, and we are availing ourselves to PTAs to get up and going. So some training coming.
Yep. Thank you so much, Nicole. Minister Bradshaw and Dr. Archer, I believe the two of you may want to tackle this in tandem. The first question has to do with if teachers are in a better place to teach remotely than they were last year. So I guess that's a quality assurance question. And then secondly, an attendee is asking, can a school that provides 6 feet distance between desks has sanitization stations and the vaccination rate of 70% for both students, parents, and staff, and they're even willing to provide the nasal swabs, will they be allowed to open?
Okay,
All
so
right.
let me take the last one first. Again, we had that the criteria that was set by the Ministry of Health and Wellness, and we've added the additional criteria. The process is really for now the COVID monitoring unit to work with the various schools, whether public or private, because for me, there's no distinction if public schools can and has the full participation of teachers and principals and parents. Then I think that once we can meet the threshold, and the only thing that may be outstanding is the swabbing and the testing, then I think we are in a position that we can perhaps approach a level of reopening over the course of the next couple of weeks. So yes, there are some schools that may get ready beforehand. I would like all of them to be in a position to be able to do it, but I think what the monitoring unit has to do now is to be able to go out and survey the various schools, see what they are doing and what they propose to do, give the necessary guidance, and then they will advise the Ministry of Education as to the readiness of those institutions to be able to reopen. So the challenge really is for all schools to be able to reach the same level of opening and to be willing to reach the same level of targets, but that really has to come from within. I don't think that we can mandate that happening. I think parents have to be on the same page and want to do it. Teachers have to be on the same page as the parents, and certainly we will give the support in terms of the things that are within the ministry's domain, which is making sure the sanitizing stations are in place. But if they can show they have the level of vaccination, they can show that the 6 foot distancing can be accommodated, and they've obviously accommodated their curriculum now in such a way that they can teach the children, obviously a lesser capacity at the school, then I think we are starting the preparatory stages to being able to reopen. Because I don't think that we will come back from the 6 foot at this point, given Delta and the other variants that are out there. So 6 feet is really what we have to start to plan for, and it will then mean a difference in obviously our curriculum as well. As to your second question in relation to whether teachers are better equipped to deal with the online environment, teachers were thrust into this emergency response teaching at the beginning of this pandemic, and it has not been easy for our teachers at all. It hasn't been easy for most of us, but it has been very difficult for them to be able to cope. Now, we've tried, Dr. Ramona Archer-Bradshaw was the former acting principal at the Urgeston Teachers Training College, and we worked very closely to be able to put on a number of sessions for teachers during that period. And that is continuing even in her role as the Chief Education Officer. So I would have to say that we are mindful of the support that teachers require. We are providing both the short-term, the medium-term, and the long-term courses that they can take advantage of. It is not mandatory for teachers to do it, but what we try to do is to encourage, because at the end of the day, we're not putting a gun to their head, but we're simply saying, these are the tools that you're going to need in the online environment. It is our responsibility as a ministry to give you some options that we can provide you with those, the tools that you need to do your job. We have realized that there are some teachers who are older who may not be as au fait with the technology, and where possible, we've tried through the Oversight and Monitoring Committee that was put in place through the Ministry of Education to be able to pair those teachers with younger teachers who may have a little bit more experience. And Dr. Denny would have led that committee for me as well. And with the team of persons, experienced professionals that we had, they went into the classroom in the virtual environment, and it wasn't a test of teachers to see how good or bad they were. It was really an opportunity for us at the ministry to understand what were some of the challenges that teachers were having, and to hear from them what were the tools that they needed in order to do their job better. Now, lastly, I would say to you that I am one who believes that if we're going to do this thing, we gotta go for the best. And we were able to find a partnership with the Finland University. Finland is one of those places that is well known for its educational system and very high standards of excellence within education. And we were able, through the IDB, to find a partnership with the Finland University, where many of our teachers are being trained, not just this year, but they were also trained during the early stages of the pandemic. And we are forging those relationships because we want to transfer knowledge from those larger countries to Barbadian teachers as well. Whenever the market opens and teachers can travel, well, that's the next thing that we're going to do, send them out to be able to improve on their skills. But so long as the technology right now allows us to do it, our focus is being able to bring the classrooms to our teachers and to allow them to go into other people's classrooms across the world where they have adapted to the online environment. So in short, Ziggy, I would have to say that we are in a better position in terms of the platforms we are providing for our teachers. There's always room for improvement, but we are responding to what they are saying as well, that they need the particular training in to help them to do their job better. So I hope that explains where we are at this point.
Yep. It definitely does.
Vicky, I would
you
also
want to
like
add
to
to
say,
that?
yes, I would also like to say here that in addition to focusing on our teachers, we're also focusing on our principals. Just over the summer, we had a number of training sessions, a number of workshops, professional development workshops for our principals, because in as much as we want our teachers to teach well in this COVID-19 environment, we want our principals to be able to lead well in this environment as well. So we can't forget the principals. And just about 2 weeks ago, we had some workshops for those principals who took up new positions at various secondary and primary schools because they cannot be left out. This is a project. Education is something that needs everybody who's on board to be equipped. We need the principals to be tooled up. We need the teachers to be tooled. We need the parents to be tooled. Everybody needs to be tooled. And we're going to do our best to ensure that that happens.
All right. Thank you so much, Minister and Dr. Bradshaw, Chief as I prefer to call her. So what I just heard, for those persons who are now joining and persons who are running over the information in their heads, is that we need to be responsible. We know what we're supposed to do. We can be vaccinated, we should do so, and allow everything else to fall into place. And the sooner we get these things done, the sooner the students can return to the classroom. If there is an institution that can prove to the ministry that they are ready to return, reach out and you'll be willing to facilitate the request, do an assessment or whatnot to say, all right, well, you can go. That's correct, right, Minister?
That is correct. And let me just coach it in language that everybody understands. Everything that we do is guided by public health. So we have set a roadmap as to where we want to go. But the truth of the matter is that every day there's another dynamic that we are having to deal with. But we have to start somewhere. And if we can get these basic things done, then I'm pretty sure that the COVID monitoring unit will indicate to the ministry that these schools are ready to go. And therefore, we're in a position when that time comes to be able to give the green light. I've also said to the retailers, because I met with them as well recently, we said to them, even in relation to school uniforms, we know people, we've said, we're not insisting on school uniforms in the classroom because we know how difficult these times are. But we've said to them, even in relation to going back into school, we'll give notice. We're not going to come next week and say you're going back to school on Monday. But we're going to have to make sure that we cover our bases in terms of safety first, and then we will make the announcement to the public as to when we are ready, when we believe that the country is in a position that there is readiness. Prime Minister has said we want 10,000 people vaccinated a week. We've set ourselves a target at the national level. So we got to set ourselves some targets at the school level. If this means as much to us as I think it does, then I think it has to be a movement of all parties to be able to get the children vaccinated as quickly as possible as well.
All right, Minister. So on that same note of school uniforms, because I had that question there noted, what do you say to a parent who has been instructed that their child must attend school in a school uniform and really can't afford it? And some people are facing this as a reality. They not that they didn't buy them because they weren't sure what was happening. They really didn't have the means to buy them. And then the ones who weren't sure what was happening didn't buy them either. And now we're being told that you need to be in a school uniform in order to attend class. Is this ministry sanction? Is this something that you have to respect? And I use respect very technically with regards to the child receiving the education. What's the ministry's input on that stance?
I am on record as indicating that, to put an additional pressure on parents in this environment, I think would be totally uncaring and unkind. There are some leaders of institutions that believe that, there must be certain standards that students must have coming into the classroom. And I get that. And I understand that we may want to have them in uniform, maybe for the first day. But the truth is, do they need to be in uniform every single day? Because if the parents cannot afford the uniforms, and if, for instance, the cameras are off, because in many cases the conditions in the households are not conducive to the children turning on the camera, then I can find no good reason why we are insisting that the cameras, the students must be in uniform if you're not going to be able to see them. So I have a difficulty with a policy coming from the ministry that mandates that students must be in uniform. I think that if parents want their students to do so, they are free to do so. But from the ministry's perspective, given all that we are seeing, and I represent a community that I see people who are vulnerable in terms of households. The children want to go to school, they want to get online, but the parents have not been working for the last few months, they haven't worked for the last year, and they are more about trying to find food to put on the table than they are about a school uniform. When that time comes, we will support in whatever way we can those households that need the back to school supplies and need the uniforms to be able to get back to school. But I always make the comparison with our private schools. In many cases, the private schools haven't insisted that children are in uniforms. What is it that makes our public school system so different? Let the children learn. Let the children take advantage of the learning online. But from the ministry's perspective, we're not mandating it at this point in time.
All right, thank you for that clarity, Minister. I know a lot of parents wanted to hear that, and it's best coming from you. Another question here that I flagged as I'm going through them is parents are asking about providing the support, the ones that can. Are parents allowed to sit into the classrooms and assist teachers, meet with them before, help them plan, because they're realizing that it is taxing, and they're wondering, the ones that can are wondering, how can they assist? Are they allowed to assist?
Well, I think we had last year some challenges with parents. So, it was a new environment. Parents went into the virtual environment, and some of them were a little disruptive, I must tell you. And it created some challenges for our teachers because for the first time, parents were actually seeing what happens in a classroom. They were seeing the challenges that teachers had to face trying to manage multiple students in one space, children on different levels of the spectrum, children disrupting the classroom, others trying to learn all at the same time. And it can be disruptive for a teacher who has planned a lesson, who wants to deliver that lesson in a particular way, and a parent is interfering in the classroom environment. So my simple advice would be, if there are concerns, perhaps message the teacher if that facility has been allowed by the teacher, or make contact to be able to share your views or your suggestions. But in the interest of allowing our teachers to do what they have been qualified to do, I would strongly recommend that we try not to interfere with what they are tasked with doing. I think that's important. And the good thing is there are many teachers who are receptive to parents providing, honest and open discussion about classes or offering suggestions. And if the teacher is willing, by all means, I'm sure the parent can participate. But as a rule, it is not something that we encourage, especially if it is going to lead to disruption in the classroom environment. And Nicole, you might want to speak to it because as a teacher yourself, I'm pretty sure I'm speaking for you and others that know that you have a set line of march in terms of what you want to deliver, and then parents are interfering or interjecting. Let me just say that I think that this whole experience has been good for parents because it has given them an insight as to what teachers go through. But it has also taught them as well some of the basics, knowledge of what children are getting in schools as well, because we can't take for granted that every parent understands or remembers concepts from primary school or nursery school or secondary school. And so I find that this has also been a learning experience and a curve for parents. But we have to now manage those expectations of parents and certainly allow our teachers to do what they are tasked with doing, Ziggy.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Minister. Most definitely. When I'm at home and I have to be monitoring my little sister in class, I can tell you, I am in infants A or infants B for that period of time, and then I have to do my work. And I think a lot of parents suffer through that when you're finished, you realize, well, I have not done anything. I've been at school the entire time. So yeah, we have an understanding for how that goes. And one of the questions that is particular that came up, it speaks to the ministry providing technical assistance. Does the ministry provide technical assistance for parents and students who are having difficulties? I know we spoke about the videos that you have on the website and whatnot, but if I get into difficulty at 9:30 in the morning and I need to get things running quickly, where do I turn? Who do I call to ensure that I can get my child into the classroom?
Usually the teachers, the students would go through their ITCs, their information technology coordinators at the respective schools, and they would usually offer the technical assistance to help them to get online. But in all fairness, we've been discussing at the ministry being able to have like a technical support team on call, because, you know, we have to get to a point where we are flexible as well, and that students should be able to call, you know, a technical support team or parent on Saturday or Sunday and be able to be walked through exactly what is necessary to be able to get them to get back online or to get them to get into their Google Classroom. So I think the technology and the pandemic is really showing us that we cannot be so inflexible anymore, that we just work at 8:30 till 3 o'clock. There are some teachers, yes, who go beyond the call of duty, and big up to all of them who do. But the truth of the matter is some do feel that it's an intrusion when parents are calling late in the evening into the night, right, Nicole? And others are calling on the weekend as well. So I think we have to respect the teacher's time, while at the same time.
I think you want me to comment, Minister. I will say.
We have to respect the teacher's time, while at the same time realizing that times are changing and we have to be a bit more flexible. And if that means that we have to have an outside of hours team to be able to respond to the concerns and to address the concerns, then that may be the direction that we may have to go in. And as we are getting ready to, we're in the process of doing an IT policy, looking at the role of the ITCs, looking at how technology is going to play a bigger role in the classrooms, as we start to do electrical upgrades and make sure that the improvements when children go back to the classroom environment are such that children can use technology now in the classroom as well. Then I think that, you know, we have to start to think outside of the box in relation to how we treat the technology and how we treat to, you know, being able to address technical issues in relation to our computer systems that children are using.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Minister. Nice and comprehensive.
Ziggy, if I may weigh in on the whole question of parents in the classroom.
Go ahead.
During the process when we were monitoring instruction, I was pleasantly surprised by the number of working class parents that I saw helping their children. They were not intruding, they were simply there giving their children support. And you know, we have perceptions about the kind of people who help their children. And I was therefore very heartened by the number of working class parents that I saw sitting with their children and making sure that they paid attention to and benefited from the instruction that the teachers were delivering.
All right, thank you so much for that, Dr. Denny. But I know persons are trying their best. That's one thing that can be said. Everybody's trying the best where they could to ensure that their ward receives the education that they need based on whatever challenges they're going through. So everyone is putting their foot forward to see where they can lead best in this fight against COVID. So, Minister, we tackled a lot of things, but we still have
if I may
questions.
Just plug in here, Ziggy, before we go in.
Go ahead.
I just want to respond to what the minister did say, and I do wear the different caps where I can see it from a parent side, I can see it from the teacher's side, I see it from the different angles, and I live it and I know it, you know, but I don't know that the teachers want to get on with the teaching. So parents, we have to resist the urge to jump in there and do the work or do the answers and do these things and so on that sometimes happens and frustrate the teachers. We want you to be there giving that support, that supportive role, make sure that the children are up, that they have their breakfast, that they have their tools ready, that they have the necessary books and so on available, they have their water handy, that is the kind of support that teachers want to know that they have from you while their child is online. While your child is online, the teacher wants to fully engage that child. Okay, yes, for the younger ones, the parents' encouragement is very helpful because, you know, they might be looking at the parent to gauge from you, is it okay to me to interact with this person that's on the screen? So for the little ones, we understand that, and we would, you know, understand that those parents would be closer by, or something might even have to come into the camera zone in order to get those children to feel comfortable. But for those older children, the independence needs to develop. So we need those parents to just let them have the tools. You need to get on with your work, you know, make sure they have what they need, and you let them be like the teacher, do what they have to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. All right, as I continue to browse the questions here to see where we have not touched. A lot of the questions, as you would see, the Area Minister asked the reopening of school, and you've touched that many times. So if I recap correctly, is that there are protocols at the ministry, and we're going to work after this meeting, things that we can put out there so persons have them, probably on a little poster or something. You know, WhatsApp is effective, so persons can see what is required of them, what the targets are, so we can decide is either we're going to meet these targets to have the safe reopening of schools, or we're going to not meet them. With regards to blended learning and structuring schools in a way where they can go in, let's say like someone asked any question, if you go to school Monday, stay home Tuesday, go to school Wednesday, stay home Thursday, go to school Friday. Is that something that's going to be on the cards in order to speed up re-entering school for the younger age group, that is, because there are no vaccines for them as yet? So once the older students meet the target, what is going to happen to that 0 to 6 age range if the Pfizer vaccine is not available as yet?
Yeah, I think first of all, Ziggy, you know, all schools are not the same in terms of the size of the school plan. So I think we got to put that on the table first of all. So it's not a one size fits all approach to every school, which is why we've engaged with the COVID monitoring unit to go in and start to do the assessments and to work with the various schools so that we can reach a point where we have a roadmap for each individual school, as well as an overall roadmap as to when we can return. So yes, the intention would be that we could get the various age cohorts back in at all levels, but we have to have certain things in place, obviously, before we can actually do that. But we had just remember that each school is not the same. And there's the issue of ventilation that the monitoring unit would have raised in the Ministry of Health and Wellness. So there are some things even from the ministry's end we may have to do in order to accommodate the safe return to school, which we may not have had to do when it was under the 3 feet, but now with the Delta variant where it is, there may be different restrictions and different requirements that are expected of us at this point in time. So that's why we're saying we have to work towards the target, but at the same time, you know, the discussion with the PTAs, the discussion with parents and teachers is important. And that's why we've taken this very bold step to try to engage with the NCPTA, encourage other PTAs to reform, create the forums where PTAs can bring in persons from the vaccination team if they want to have an open discussion. They can bring in persons from the Ministry of Education if they want to have a discussion on a particular area. It cannot be any longer that we just react to problems. Instead, we need to be talking about the issues of mental health and wellness, and you know what are the things that our children are eating. That's the other role that a PTA is also supposed to play. Okay, but we have to start to change the image of the PTA as well, because it can't be that you're out there protesting all the time about something that's going wrong. But when there are these types of discussions, parents are nowhere to be seen. And that's why I've challenged Nicole and Sean to help me to make sure that by the end of this term, all of our schools across the country have active PTAs. Whatever the Ministry of Education has to do to help to support that. And I think we've shown on this occasion that we are prepared to meet them halfway, that we will do whatever we can to support this type of initiative, because I'm tired of not being able to say that we have active participation of parents generally. And as I said before, you don't have to be part of a PTA in order to have a voice. But the truth is that there are particular ways in which to engage and also to be educated and to learn and to share ideas. And if we can have these associations at every school, it will certainly strengthen not just the relationship with the ministry, but it will also strengthen the relationship between parents as well as teachers and indeed the wider community as well. So there is a lot of value in what we've started this evening. And I sincerely hope that we can continue to engage in this way. This is not going to be the last session by any means, but it really is the start of a session that has allowed us to hear from parents and hopefully to explain and to allay some of the fears that I believe are out there and misconceptions about what the ministry is doing and what the Ministry of Health and Wellness is doing as it relates to the return to school.
All right, thanks for that, Minister. A question here for a follow-up from Dr. Archer. Chief, I know you answered the question with regards to screen time, and I think it's important as well for the socialization. So a question is being asked as to if there can be regulated time, even if it's once a week, once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks, where we step away from the formal curriculum and just allow the students to interact, get to know each other, talk, laugh, maybe play games or whatever. Not, as I said, not lunchtime, not break time. And so it can be phased in. So it's not extra time on the computer, but you minimize some of that formal time and allow now for the curriculum to facilitate this kind of interaction.
Yeah, certainly that will be considered. I'm sure that in discussion with my team and also with the principals, we can come up with ways that we can allow that to happen.
All right, that sounds good, because I know that's one of the concerns that parents will have. There's a question here I think that Dr. Denny, you can tackle, and that is with regards to reform of the 0 to 5 curriculum and how children are developing and how they're affected during this time.
I think not only for the 0 to 5, but for all children, we have to look at what we have in place to develop the resilience of our children, both the physical resilience as well as their emotional resilience. We have a curriculum, for example, that indicates that physical education is part of the core curriculum. But you know how many children don't get physical education in schools? Because teachers don't like teaching physical education. Some principals are not interested in having the students do physical education. And as they grow older, it gets more difficult. As a matter of fact, the chief and I were having a meeting with some groups recently, and we were told by one of the persons that the children in secondary school only do physical education if they are doing PE at the CXC level. And that should not be, because it is a part of the core curriculum. Every child should be accessing physical education. And that is even more critical at this time because it helps with the physical resilience of the children. In terms of the emotional resilience, we've recognized that children will need that, and that is why the mental health committee has been put in place. But the curriculum has to place emphasis on that resilience for all of our children, not just the 0 to 5.
All right, thanks for that, Dr. Denny. Minister, a question for you. You have two hats. You get to be acting Prime Minister as well as Minister of Education. And my question is wondering what is going to happen with those schools that are being used as isolation centers with regards to the re-entrance of school. If a school is ready with regards to the students, teachers are vaccinated, all the requirements you outlined earlier are in place, but the school is or is still being used as an isolation center, what happens to those students?
Well, I think, first of all, if you look at the numbers, we're close to the 7,000 probably by the end of today. I don't anticipate that we're going to see a significant spike in vaccination rate in the next, say, week or two. And I'm hopeful that Bajans will listen to what the Prime Minister has said, the substantive Prime Minister that is in relation to letting us get our vaccination rate up. So I think we are working at a few weeks from now as opposed to a week or two. By then, once the numbers start to decline, the intention is that the schools are handed back over. We've had the good precedent in relation to Blackburn and Gollop. It was used as an isolation facility when the cases came down and the persons were able to be moved from that facility. The school was handed back over to parents. It was thoroughly cleaned, sanitized, and it was inspected by the Ministry of Health, and it was handed back over. I don't anticipate that there will be anything different in relation to any of the other schools, but let's not put the cart before the horse. We have to, first of all, get the vaccination rate up, make sure that we are able to get the students vaccinated, and then we can start to engage in the conversation of the when. And when we return to school. I think that is really the first hurdle that we must cross. And so each week we're going to be looking at our numbers. Just as I've said to you tonight, we're close to the 7,000 mark. By next week, if we can get 10,000 or 12,000, it is our responsibility together to ramp up the numbers now so that we can get to that level of vaccination. And obviously, you know that it's a 4-week dose for the Pfizer. That's what we have available to us now. There's more Pfizer vaccines to come. So it's not to say that we're running out of vaccines, but we need to use what we have in order to get the next complement of vaccines that have been made available to us for children. And if we get, Ziggy, the other vaccines, whenever those are approved, we'll also do the same thing in terms of our vaccination campaign. So I don't think parents have to worry about the facilities or that there's going to be undue delay in handing back over a facility. It is really up to all of us to make sure that we get these people across the country vaccinated and out of the facilities so that we can get the facilities stood down and hand it back over to the Ministry of Education as soon as possible.
All right. Thank you for that, Minister. We've had a very long night. We're over the time allocated, and we appreciate that. I'm going to ask you one more question, Minister. As you said, this session is not isolated. There'll be many more of these that persons can continue to log on and reach out and ask questions and discuss the issues that are tackling the education system. But I have a question here where a parent is getting difficulty from an employer as they're trying to balance the time to ensure the child receives the online education. Is the government looking at putting anything in place, speaking with the social partnership? I know all the tidbits and technicalities are going. Is there any consideration in the framework to allow, or let's say encourage employers to work with employees that have to split time or use a little extra time, even if they're going to put it back in, to ensure that the child can receive education online?
Yeah, I think that, it may not have been part of our narrative in the last few weeks simply because we were not in school. But as this environment continues where we're in more of an online environment, I think that, whether myself or perhaps the substantive Prime Minister will at some point address this, because if children are going to be online because of rising cases and because they're getting sicker than they should, during this period, then there has to be a conversation with employers to be more lenient and more understanding with employees who are parents as well. So I think the only reason that it hasn't entered the discourse is because we were trying to get the children back into school. But if that is the concern that parents are having, then definitely we will have to engage at the level of the social partnership and certainly at a national level to be able to coerce some of our partners to understand what we are facing with our parents as well.
All right, thank you so much for that consideration, Minister. And before you go, there are a lot of supervision schemes. Let me use that word, popping up. So parents are concerned about what regulatory provisions are going to be put in place to ensure that nobody, to say that Ziggy, that going to teeth you, and I like to come down in Beijing sometimes so we can understand Ziggy that can come and teeth you 2 ornaments, and Ziggy that can peep at this body and peep around this corner, doesn't come into my home. And I think that he's reputable and it turns out to be a disaster. Is the ministry aware of these new businesses evolving, and what measures are going to be put in place to ensure that they're regulated or some regulation exists to save the general public from being vulnerable in a situation like this?
Yeah, just before coming into this meeting, in this COVID subcommittee meeting, we were having a conversation with the CMO regarding this and the minister, because what we are recognizing, what we call them, are the surveillance mechanisms that are cropping up across the country to be able to allow students to participate in online learning while parents are off at work. And there is concern for those so-called mechanisms because of the lack of surveillance, maybe even also protocols that are in place at some of those entities. I think the Ministry of Health is well aware, and I think they have already started to look into them. They don't come to us directly to say that they're setting up a particular mechanism to help to look after children. But the truth is that in this environment, the Ministry of Health and Wellness has indicated that even those types of operations, they are not supportive of. And particularly for the same reason that we have put on the table before, that we need to make sure that we get our numbers down, that the environments are safe before we actually allow students to return to the classroom. So if something is reported to us, then we will report it to the Ministry of Health and Wellness and certainly to the COVID monitoring unit. But that right now, that is not something that we are encouraging or that even we are aware of as a ministry, because nobody comes to us and says that they are actually setting up that type of enterprise.
All right. Understood. Thank you so much, Minister. It was a long evening. I think we covered a whole lot of ground. For those of you who may have had questions that were not answered, we have access to the questions. I can promise you that I will still try to go through them and point any of them in the direction of any of the panelists so they can at least give you an answer. Maybe it be on Facebook or wherever that we can still get the information out to you. This is the digital world, but we want to thank you so much for participating this evening. I'm going to allow the panelists to give brief closing remarks before we depart. Can start with you, Minister.
Mm-hmm. I just want to thank, first of all of the panelists and yourself, Ziggy, for managing this forum. You've done exceptionally well. I love the fact that you're a young person as well, and so that pleases my heart. I'm also grateful to the ACPTA because I know they've heard me say on many occasions we really want to get the PTAs functioning and fully participating in discussions at the schools, and so I feel very happy this evening that this is actually the start of something that we can do more of and we can work together to engage. We're also looking at student councils as well, because I believe that for me, being in school, I had a lot of opportunities to speak, to hear my own voice. And I believe very strongly that we have to give young people the opportunity to be heard and to express themselves. So while we are strengthening PTAs, it is also my desire to be able to strengthen our student councils, and that is at the youngest age, as well as from the primary schools, but also at the secondary schools. We want to hear from our young people. We want to hear from your children, how they feel about the online environment, how they feel about their teachers, how they feel about their schools, how they feel about their future as well. So it's not to say that we are talking to only one set of stakeholders. The ministry really wants to hear from everybody, because that is how we are going to help to transform education. And I know Dr. Denny has a huge task ahead of her in terms of the reforms, but I think these types of conversations help us to get a better understanding as to how parents are thinking, how our teachers are thinking, how our students are thinking, what are some of the challenges that are out there, so that we can also meet the demands. And obviously, Dr. Ramona Archer Bradshaw brings with her a different perspective because of her years of experience at the Urgeston Teachers Training College. And I think, again, because we understand that without teachers, we're not going to get the quality of education that is required to transform our economy, then the emphasis has to be on ensuring that we have a better relationship with the Urgeston Teachers Training College so that we can improve the quality of teaching. So I think we have a good team, certainly on this call, but we have a wider team in education that is really trained to be able to kind of close some of the gaps that have gotten out of control over the years. But we need the support of parents, we need the support of our teachers, we need the support of our unions or all of our stakeholders. And of course, if we're in this together to help our students, we need the support of our students as well. Again, we work towards a roadmap, Ziggy. This is why we are here. It is a journey to be able to get to the phased reopening of school. But I think once people understand that that is our intention, if we can get back in 6 weeks, that's what we're going to do. If children get 4 weeks of school, that's better than having none. If for whatever reason they can't get the full get back into school before the end of this term, then we plan for January. And we just need to make sure that we have all of our children, as many vaccinated as possible, and our vaccination rate up. But help us to be able to help to get the kids back into school. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to the parents for also being online and being attentive and sharing your views as well.
Thank you so much, Minister. Dr. Bradshaw.
Thank you, Ziggy. I echo the remarks of the minister. I want to thank the parents for their questions and for their suggestions. I want to reassure you that we will incorporate them. We will discuss them with the team and we can see where best we can fit them in. But just know that we have short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. We will not be closed forever. Schools will not be closed forever. We are working to see how we can make this online environment as comfortable for our students as possible, all the while looking ahead and seeing what exactly we need to do to ensure a safe reopening of schools as it relates to face-to-face classes. Remember, parents, it's about evaluating the risks. And once we realize it is safe under the guidance of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, I assure you that the minister will give the clearance for the schools to be open for face-to-face classes. But I look forward to interacting with you even more in our sessions to come. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you so much, Chief. Dr. Denny. Just gonna ask you to unmute.
Thank you, Ziggy. I want to say that these children are going to lead the country as we grow older. And I think that we therefore want them to get the kind of education that allows them to make decisions that are in our best interest when we are old and gray. So we ask you parents to join with us to do everything in our power at this particular point in time to make sure that our children, that your children benefit from education, regardless of whether it is an online format or a face-to-face format. We have to do everything in our power to make sure that we keep giving them a quality education. Our future depends on it.
Thank you for that, Dr. Denny. Short and sweet and to the point, because I too want to be able to get old and great and know that I'm going to be in good care.
Yes.
All right, our valuable members from the PTA Association. Who's going to go first? You're going to go first, Sean?
Yeah, I'll go first. I want to say a special thank you to Honorable Santi Bradshaw, Ramona Archer Bradshaw, Chief, and Dr. Aideme Denny for her input in this afternoon. And I'm excited about what happened this afternoon. And I believe this is one in several that will come shortly. And I was getting up to go to my office earlier and I got a slip from a principal of a school who is interested in getting her PTA up and running. And I am sure Nicole also have some of those. And we will begin by the virtual training and make it happen and make it real. Just rest assured that the NCPTA is not asleep. We are willing and ready and able to do what is necessary. I want to thank parents who come online today and who give up their time to make this possible. And to all, I thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Nicole?
Not much more for me to say except to give our email details again as well, bncptainc@gmail.com. That's where you can send your emails to us. And I just will end with saying, we can't change the direction of the wind, but we can change our sails, adjust them so that we still reach our destination. And if we do that together, we will all get there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. So thank you, panel, Minister. appreciate the time that you've taken to do this with us. Everyone else, you know, you're really appreciated. Parents, it can't happen without you. I'm excited. I'm very excited based on what happened here today. And this is a great initiative where we can find solutions. And that's the whole thing.
That's what we want.
When we meet and work together to find solutions, there has to be greatness at the end of that roadmap. So I hope everyone continues to be safe, and we look forward to seeing you on the next session of Let's Talk. So have a great evening. Thank you so much for coming out.